Hello and welcome to our Conscious Leader Circle, where we meet once a month to help each other navigate through these uncertain times so we can be grounded, energized, and focused and live a centered, connected, and conscious life. I'm Lidia, also known as Lady Apona, and our special guest today is Anne Rosart. And I'm so excited and pleased to welcome Anne. Anne and I actually have a whole history together. Anne was my very first, well, not my first Reiki teacher, but my Reiki master teacher. And I met Anne through divine intervention when I was just browsing through, was it the Omega Center, Anne? Is that where we met? The Omega Center.
Is the bookstore still there?
No, it's been gone a long time ago. And but I remember it clearly, just like Dave's comments. and I was walking through the Omega Center bookstore and light hit Anne's pendant that she was wearing.
I should have worn it.
Oh, you should have worn it. I know, that would have been awesome. That would have been awesome. And I just went over to her and I didn't even really, I kind of saw what it was. And then until I got close up, and it was like the Reiki, was it the Reiki Kanji, Anne?
Well, universal energy in the Sanskrit.
Yeah,
and a beautiful sterling pendant. Yeah, that had been made for me. I didn't know that she had seen it. We were like magnets, and we just had this magnificent conversation. And at the end, I said, "What made you come over and talk to me?" She said, "Oh, your pendant."
Yeah, I'll never forget that, because people were saying, "Are you ever going to do your Reiki level 3, Lidia?" Or like, "What's up with all this?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to leave it to the universe." And not long thereafter, the universe decided that I was ready and that Anne was my teacher. and that's how we met. It was really divine intervention. So today Anne will be sharing her expertise on hypnosis, which is so exciting.
I'm still a learner. Every day I'm still learning.
Always humble, which in her area of specialty, we'll put it that way, is the quantum healing hypnosis technique created by Dolores Cannon. And I just love Dolores Cannon, if everyone's familiar with her. So Anne discovered energy medicine healing in the early 80s as a certified polarity therapist and reflexologist. However, it was during Anne's discovery of Reiki that Anne really awakened her passion to tap into the potential of universal energy. And isn't that amazing? Anne collaborated with Brian Ward, Canada's first Reiki master teacher, and together they provided workshops for several years. Throughout this time, she was also a practicing social worker, specializing in child welfare, addiction, and trauma. Anne maintains it was energy medicine that enabled her to manage a stressful and often trauma-inducing career. Now, Anne is happily retired from social work and has developed a love and passion for Dolores Cannon's incredible work in hypnosis, the quantum healing hypnosis technique. Take it away, Anne.
Oh my. Are people familiar with Dolores?
Yes.
Dolores Cannon? Yeah, okay.
You know what? I just came across her not long ago, and it was funny because I had no idea how popular she was, and you know, her radio show that she had. And it just seemed friends started to talk about her out of the blue. So it's almost like there's a bit of a renaissance with her in a way, because she's, you know, all of a sudden, you know, she's sort of popping up everywhere, which is out of the blue. She's very
Exactly. You know, we all stumble on her and we're not even sure how. You know, I had heard of her. I'd certainly seen her YouTubes, but maybe it was at a time when I kids at home, or I was working full time, or I couldn't fully attend to it. But it seems like Renaissance is the perfect word. And I really think it's because her modality it's time. It's the modality of our times, actually, because it is accessible and it's something that is available to all of us. But because her work was so well researched, it's not an opinion, it's not a thought. It was based on 45 years of thousands of sessions that she's done. So she is just, as she says, she is the reporter. She didn't create it. It's not her ideas. It's not her culture. It's information that she has gathered over thousands of sessions. And she was able to, sort of distill it so that we can use it. She's written 19 books based on her sessions. And there's 2 posthumously, I think her daughter, Julia Cannon, is putting out. I don't know if you've ever tried reading her books. They're, it's just choose one. Just choose whatever one you choose will be the right one. But I seem to start with the last one first and work back. But they kind of knocked me out, and I thought it was personal. But I now read from and have learned through all the training I've taken that's pretty typical. It's like we're downloading the concepts, and we have to process it and sleep on it and come back to it.
I was going to ask that, Anne, because literally I had to lie down after reading her this one book that I had bought. Like, it was that exhausting. Like, and I thought it was just me. Like, I literally had to put my head down on the couch.
Exactly.
So
I had a client come to me for a session, for a hypnosis session, and she's in the middle of taking the training, the QHHT training. And her big question in the session is, maybe I'm not meant to do this because I can't even get through one training lesson without crashing. But in the session, the information that came from her higher self was, you're taking a lot of information in very quickly. You're the mother of 3 children and you teach high school full time. Give yourself a break and just, take it in the small portions at a time. But yeah, no, it's so there's a lot to consume, and the work the information that she was gathering in the 80s is like mind blowing. I mean, I think that, we might have heard it. And I think she might be the one who said that everything you see on news is fake and everything in the movies is true. She says, like, Star Trek wasn't that far off the mark. But she was, so just to give you, for those who don't know, Dolores started working in hypnosis in the 60s with her husband. And then her husband had a serious debilitating accident, and she stayed at home with her kids for a while and picked up again in the 70s. And she started to create her own way of working through hypnosis. She wasn't just interested in implanting ideas about weight loss and, quitting smoking. She was interested in the information that clients could give her. And back in her day, clients were somnambulistic. They were pretty much out. They were not aware of what was happening. And so it would be recorded and she would process it afterward. But she started to pick up on the amount of, a few things. One, the information that was coming through from the other side, off planet here, but also she was cluing into the amount of healing that could happen in a session, like in a session, and the power of frequency. And, there is no time. And one of the biggest concepts that she gleaned, we already knew from Tesla and Einstein, but maybe it was just sort of an intellectual construct out there. And that is that there truly is, time is all now, that the multiverse is real. Parallel lives is how it's happening. And you'll be reading her stuff and you'll think, well, how come, the things from the past are supposed to influence the future, but if they're all happening all at once, how does that work? Excuse me. I have a very bossy little Maltese here who, likes the energy. So she was learning that, that had access to that information back in the 80s from multiple sessions. And she said she was being spoon-fed by her higher self, I guess, which she used interchangeably with subconscious. To be spoon-fed information, to be given information about one aspect of the work, and it would come to her in 100 different sessions. And then when she'd sort of process that, she'd move on to another concept, a bigger concept, and she'd be given more information. So she gathered everything together, but she didn't start to put it into books till, you know, sometime later. And some of the books that were in the early 2000s were information from the 80s. So it's really just catching up to us now. And we kind of have her whole curriculum in front of us, and we're ready. It's like we're ready for it now. Maybe we couldn't quite have handled it before, for lots of reasons. So.
And how did you, because she really sort of started out with a lot of ET work, didn't she? Like if you look on her radio and the whole bit, how did you, when you're researching and you were following her, sort of meld the two in terms of later on with the information she was getting, as opposed to a lot of the ET, because she was doing a lot of conferences, I remember, and talks and things like that.
I'm not quite sure what your question is.
No, just in terms of the healing and the messages from past lives, as opposed to, you know, when she started out with, she was really talking a lot about ETs and about.
Right. Yes, she was just collecting information. She, I'll have to tell you what one of her books is called, Keepers of the Garden. Mm-hmm. And she lived in Arkansas in the woods, like in a remote kind of community. And she used to travel to people's homes because she wanted to be very comfortable, and she was desperate to do sessions. And I think because of her husband, she didn't really want people coming to her. So she had this one woman that she'd been, really wanted a session. And this woman canceled on her 2 or 3 times. And so finally, Dolores said, look, I'm coming to your place, you know, one more time. I'm going to drive for the hour. And she pulls up in the driveway and she sees the woman's car is not there. There's a TV appliance truck in the driveway and a note on the front door. And she goes up the door and says, the woman says, sorry, I had to go to work, but my TV appliance guy really wants a session. And so she goes in and she does a session with this 28-year-old TV repair guy. And it was kind of like, and the session was, you know, information was coming out, but it was blocked. He was holding on to something. And so he said, I'd really like another session. And not much came out in the second session. Well, I really want another session. I'm not sure if it was a 3rd or 4th session. It was like the dam broke loose. And that's where the book Keepers of the Garden came from. And he was had so much information about how the planet was seeded. And then if she's got 5 volumes called The Convoluted Universe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm reading number 1 now. I've been plowing through it. And she's referring again to this man's name was Phil, tons of information that would come through from him. But yeah, so that's what she was doing in the 80s. And I think it was probably when she started teaching the program that she started to really inform people about the healing that could happen during the session. And would you like me to describe a little bit about how a session goes? Okay. So if you're coming for a session, they last 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm not kidding. It takes what it takes. So it's a day, and it's really good for me. I'm a total on Gemini, full air sign, and like all over the place. I'm in session. I'm totally in the zone, completely, for whatever time it takes. So it's really wonderful for me. It's a whole new thing. So if somebody is coming to me for a session, we sit down and do a get to know you for probably a good couple of hours, which kind of surprises people. But it's interesting how the 2 hours just flies by. And we talk about your life story, good, bad, and everything in between, and any concerns you have about your health, you know, illnesses, addictions, injuries, contracts you have with family members, whatever's on your mind, we put it forward. And you also bring forward a number of questions. And your questions can be, everybody wants to know, why am I here? How can I have more meaning in my life? What's my calling? You can have questions about your health, about your career, about your marriage, about your lives off planet, about your loved ones who have passed on, questions about, you know, how you can help other other people in your family. In fact, you can even be a surrogate for another person. So we talk about that in the first couple of hours. And it's the way I come to understand it, it's like not only are you giving me more information to guide the session, but it's like you're alerting your higher self. I'm ready, I'm here. But people tell me that even before they come for the session, from the time they make the decision to come, things start happening for them. They start manifesting, and they'll show up and they'll say, well, I had this list of questions, but when I started, but I have a whole different list now because I don't need these ones anymore. So we then move on to the actual session, and the trance piece takes about 2 hours. The first half, you're going into past lives or current lives or future lives, whatever your higher self believes you need to do today. And sometimes it's in between lives. And so I completely trust where your higher self is taking you, completely trust where you're going. But I ask a lot of questions about why are we here? You know, what is it that you're supposed to be looking at? And what are you looking at? So it's a pretty wonderful experience. It's a total surprise party. Expect the unexpected, have no expectations. And then the second half of the session is when we call on your subconscious and we focus on the specific questions that you brought. And there's no question too big or small, and they almost always get answered. And I tell people to sort of zero in on what they really want, because it's sort of like Google. You know, if you Google, tell me about Toronto, what are you going to get? You're going to get 10,000 pages about Toronto. But if I say, I want a vegan restaurant on Church Street, I'm going to get it. And that's kind of how the questions go. Some people have very generic questions, what's going on with the planet? And some people say, why do I have this particular illness? You know, or so it's whatever you want it to be. And the piece with the subconscious is when you're really well under, and the information that comes through, it may seem very simple, but it's usually very profound and very meaningful. And often for me, you know, often the things that come up for people are opportunities for myself to heal, is what I've also noticed. It's pretty wonderful how we connect. And when that's complete, we spend some time debriefing, because it's very dreamlike. It's dreamlike for not only the person having the experience, it's dreamlike for me as well. And the session is recorded because according to Dolores, I know she's right, probably 50% of the healing that happens when you listen to the recording. There's something that happens vibrationally when you listen to the recording. And I know for myself, you know, when I was being a good student, I've had some sessions and I've listened to it 2 or 3 times right away, or when I was going to sleep. I'll share one experience that happened to me. So my very first session, one of my questions was about my tinnitus, which I've had probably for 20 years. And I'm talking about the high, shrill pitched noise in my ears. And it gets worse when I'm stressed or when I'm awake in the middle of the night. So I asked questions about, why do I have this tinnitus? What am I supposed to be learning from it? And can it be healed? And so I was given some information about it and how to manage it. And so I obviously listened to my session the first 2 or 3 times, very obediently and whatever. And then I left it and I picked it up again about 3 months later. And I thought, oh, I really should have been listening to that. I'll listen to it again. And I'm puttering around in my kitchen. And I come to the part about tinnitus. And I just stand there like, when did it go away? When did it leave? I'd even forgotten it was a problem. So, but that's kind of how it is. But sometimes the healing happens in the moment. And I'm talking about fairly profound illnesses. And so how that happens in the session is, and sometimes it happens even before we ask a question, that we always want to know the point of origin. You know, if somebody has a situation in a relationship or an illness or some anxiety in their life they haven't been able to deal with, we want to find out, where did it start? what was the point of origin? Was it in this lifetime? I mean, you can have 5 years of intensive psychotherapy and sometimes not get to the root of what your issue is. So was it in this lifetime or was it in another lifetime? And that's often where the higher self has already decided to go. And we'll show you at what point did you have the original issue. And so we reprocess, what were you experiencing at that time? What were your thoughts in that moment? What were your feelings in that moment? And we can do it in such a way that you don't have to relive the trauma of whatever might have happened, but you get to witness it and experience it. And it is going through that the energy around it dissipates. And that's where the healing happens. It's such an incredible thing. I mean, it just blows me away every time. So I had a woman last week. Can I tell you a quick story about it's all, I mean, don't know her name, and I don't think she'd mind me sharing it, but she had 3 quick lifetimes. And the first one was, and I didn't know at the time, but she was completely under. It's very rare these days. We're usually aware. We're not awake. We're in a theta state. We're aware, but this one was fully under. And she said, oh, there's a snowflake. There's an ant. And I said, oh, do you have a sense of being in a physical body? And she said, I think I'm a sprite. And I said, oh, and what do you do as a sprite? I take care of the forest. And her voice is like that. And the next, so we explored that a little bit. It was quite fun. But the next lifetime, she went right into being a pauper, a poor boy in rags at castle gates with hordes of people begging for food and crying. And in that lifetime, starved to death. And so this one of this woman's issues was around poverty consciousness and food. And we were able to explore that a little bit further after we saw this scene and take her right back to that. It was like, anyway, but the third one, she was with a tribe of women and describing this beautiful tribe of women healers, and they were in a circle and they were dancing and they were chanting. And when we looked at her the day of her death, they were all burned. And the emotion around that was absolutely incredible for her. And 2 of her daughters were present. So that's just like, it was a total range of emotion, totally different things, but everything that we discussed and every question she brought forward was dealt with in those 3 scenarios. It was, I'm really simplifying it. This was over a 2-hour process, but a wonderful adventure for that woman with a kind of healing. The sprite I had never seen before. And she had no idea about sprites or elementals or anything like that. And she said, I have some homework to do. So, but that was, it's just, they're lovely. They're all lovely. They're all totally different. And I'm sorry to go off on that tangent, but it was still very fresh for me.
This is wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much for sharing everything you have so far. Does anybody have, I have a couple of questions, but does anybody have any questions, comments for Anne about the quantum healing hypnosis technique or anything related to what we're talking about?
And I have a quick question about, if you read Dolores's books, have you noticed that I found that, any of the past lives or a lot of the past lives where anybody dealt with energy work or did, worked with, not necessarily Reiki, but they were quite sad lives. Like if you notice, like when they were going back, that a lot of the times they were killed or they were sort of, burned or anything like that. Have you found that to be in your experience with working with clients?
I have, and I found it in my own sessions, times where I was shunned or very isolated or, I was gifted with some, interesting psychic abilities just to entertain myself when I lived a life of isolation. But yes, it's true. And that's why they're drawn to understand it. You know, they're drawn to, there's something missing here. I just need to sort of understand the cycle and make sure I learn the lesson this time around. But and not that everybody's drawn to it. There are a lot of people who just come out of sheer curiosity, and then they come back because they realize there's huge potential, you know, beyond it. But yeah, a lot of people are drawn to the information just to understand the opening, because a lot of people are coming to their gifts and their awareness like now, like it's right now. And Lydia, maybe can all relate to this. I feel like I give away it took me 30 years to figure out where I'm at, but I can give it away in an hour. You know, the people who are coming to the information are like, I know there's things I have to do, and I just know, and I'm about to take off. I don't know where to start, and wow, but they didn't have all that a year ago. But they want to understand it, and there usually is a trail to the gaps in their lives, the blanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. That was awesome. Anybody else have any questions? Anything to explore? I have some questions, then I'll go ahead.
Great.
I'll volunteer myself. Well, first of all, I think it's really amazing. The soul's journey is so incredible, you know, and the example you gave of the woman who had 3 very different past lives. And then the question I ask is why, you know, like, why would you have these different experiences? And the bigger answer is usually, well, for your own development, you know, of the soul itself, right? So one of my questions, and I don't know if you know, has Dolores in her channelings received information about what, like, the process we go through when we're in between lives to determine what we want to learn in our next life or experience for our own growth in our next life?
Yeah, she did. Probably, if you only read one book, I'm looking at my stack of my computer's on top of all my Dolores books, but there's a book called Between Death and Life. And she goes into in great detail about what happens in between lives and why we choose certain lives for us. Why are some lives so traumatic? And then we'll have what she calls a resting life. And you know, you look around and you say, well, how come some people just sort of breeze through life and they don't have family issues and they have money and blah blah blah? She said, well, that was a resting life. You had no idea how much trauma they had to get through before they decided they just wanted to experience Earth and all of the emotional stuff, but not have a huge trauma. But there are things that happen between lives that there's healing places, there's schools, there's meetings with your counsel, your guides about, you know, what do I need for my learning now? Because as Dolores says, there's no right or wrong or good or bad. Our soul's purpose is to experience everything. And when you read Between Death and Life, she actually talks about Hitler a little bit too, but that we will all have experienced everything. That the murderer will become the murdered. You know, that every relationship that we're entangled with now, we have been the other side of that relationship. And every relationship we encounter in this lifetime has been preconceived somewhat. You know, with our own soul groups and our own families, like, I'll be the good guy, you be the bad guy. I was your mother last time, I'm going to be your kid. And it really changes how we view ourselves in a relationship. But yeah, she goes into depth about that, what happens in between, and it can be eons in between, but there is no time.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I mean, we can have a full
Book in the chat afterward too, because it's so enlightening and it's so powerful for understanding why we're here. And it really, if you have any questions about death, she would say that we're dreaming now. When we die, we wake up. You know, this is just a game. This is just theater that we're in right now.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, wow, as I was saying, we could do a whole retreat on this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and yeah, so I have a couple other questions, but just on that note, what I really am drawn to at the messages that I get and the sense of our own personal and collective evolution is to allow us to understand that, again, there's no judgment, and that when we enter into, what I call Taoist non-attachment, when we embrace the experience of what we're having and have the will or the interest to create something greater out of it, whatever that is, then we kind of are starting to enter a new paradigm, a new frequency of living, where we're not going to be dragged back, right, through the attachments, like the murderer and the murderer, type of thing. I have the sense it's time for us to release that and start to resolve, right? Which is what you offer, right? We're starting to resolve the trauma. We're starting to resolve the pain and suffering from the experiences that we wanted to have, right, at the time, that are a part of us, but that we don't want to necessarily carry. So the sense that we can do some of that in between life healing now, right? Integrate it integrate that soul connection on the material plane, what I call the inner knowing, right? To not be too hard on oneself. And I always talk about releasing blame and entering into greater responsibility of self, of just who am I, of learning who I am and sort of how to live. So it's just interesting to hear about how Dolores received information. And so that would have been maybe 40 years ago, do you think?
80s, 90s, yeah.
Yeah, and how we're rapidly evolving on the planet, and that we can resolve a lot now. So, and the other point I was going to mention when you were talking about was about how many, and I think it was Dave that asked it, how many people have had trauma in their past lives because of who they are or were as healers, their roles in the community. And now is the time to release that, right? You talked about in your sessions, things just dissolving, right? The energy is just dissolving. And that is the process of healing, right? Where we're strong enough internally now to release.
Exactly. It's time.
And we can't really let go fully viscerally. We can study that intellectually, or we can do therapeutic approaches, which are all good, but we can't truly let go until we're strong enough, right, to feel secure, to have the release, to have things dissolve, which I'm sure people are ready when they come to see you. Their soul is already ready to start to release and resolve and dissolve. So it's a very powerful time on the planet. We have such great opportunity. We're going to 2100 when the North Star aligns with the North Pole. And all of this is preparing our soul, our life in this lifetime, and the interconnectedness of the oneness of energy, to reach new levels, right, of states of being and consciousness, of inner ease in the midst of what we want to experience, right, in the life. So not so much carrying the heaviness that didn't have an opportunity to resolve, but turning that experience into gold, right? So not avoiding the experience, but having a new relationship with it. So that's sort of something.
But it's almost like embracing it.
Yes.
All of who we are.
Yeah.
But I almost challenge you on that, Lidia, in terms of it feels like it's a heavy time right now where we were moving ahead and that there's been such a pushback on a lot of the, if you see, you know, the challenges to democracies around the world, where we have, you know, so much, you know, you move ahead and then you sort of move back into those things. And it almost feels like we're having to be lighthouses in a way to sort of just get through some of this period where, you know, I wish I could say that it's, you know, I'm optimistic and everything. I kind of feel like we're going through a bit of a slog right now, and we just kind of have to use our Reiki and our other things to sort of anchor that right now till we can sort of get to a time where we can sort of let more of it go. It just feels that way right now to me.
May I throw something out?
Yeah, sorry, Richard?
May I throw something into the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As an astrologer all my life, adult life, when I look at what's going on right now, there's a similarity between what went on in April of 1861, which was the American Civil War to get rid of slavery, and what went on September 1st, 1939, which was World War II, which was to overcome dictatorship and bring in democracy. And then now that if you go back to 1776, and we're not talking about the US, we're talking about the idea the government serve us. We don't serve them. Okay, and then we get to choose collectively what the kind of world we live in. The Uranus return, which is 84 years, was the US Civil War. And in fact, 7 years ago, well, the Uranus return is 4 years ago, which was, you know, 3 years before that Gettysburg Address. And so April 61 was the Uranus return. 2 days before September 1st, 1939 was the Neptune return. And December 28th this year is the Pluto return. Okay. And so all three of these is revisiting that whole idea of that the people rule, and that we can have a collective entity called a government or a society or a culture, and that pays total dignity to the individual entity, which is me and you and our families and all that. And I look at the so-called right-wing governments that just took over in Italy, and I've noticed the new proposals of Josh Hawley, the congressman in the US, how the Republican Party can rebrand itself. They actually have some good ideas, and they do understand that they're being played by the big boys. Okay. And so there is a transformation that wants to occur, but usually the transformation involves revisiting the dragon. Hello, darkness, my old friend, you know, and really say, okay, what's the evolutionary breakthrough that we need here? And it is forced upon us. Okay. And so I'm just suggesting that this is phase 3. You know, the 1861 was, okay, yeah, you're talking all about freedom. What's this slavery nonsense? You know, and then 1939, which is really the way Hitler came to power, was he called out the big money guys who had put Germany into horrendous poverty, you know, and then he somehow managed to create full employment, you know, and got popular by addressing actual needs, okay, in the midst of all that darkness, right? And so as I listen to, you know, the new right-wing leader of Italy, or I listen to, because I know French, the right-wing Marine Le Pen in France, they have some good points and they are standing up to the big boys, but we need to create a better conversation that addresses the same issues in a way that is more progressive. So it's all an evolutionary leap, and the dragon is part of it. You know, as I used to be a tournament chess player, you know, both sides of the board have something to offer here, you know. Anyway, that's my take.
Well, thank you, Richard. That's brilliant as always. And thank you, Dave, as well. I mean, that's brilliant. And it's all true. I mean, it's all inclusive. And the spiral, like everything in the universe moves in spirals. So when we start to understand that we will revisit anything that needs to be released, realigned, we will re-experience, and it can feel like the dark night of the soul. But the cliche, the darkest hours before dawn, often applies. So again, like Anne was saying, we want to embrace, you know, we embrace the experience for what it is. Try not to be too hard on ourselves. Find our center, and allow the feelings of hopelessness and despair, and fear. And then we want to move through them and know that we have the inner light, the inner strength, the inner power, each person as a highly evolved conscious being, to find our way forward in our own unique way, right? So we're all here as Anne was saying, to have experiences. And for some of us, it is the darkest time in our lives. And for others, it's the greatest time in their lives. But that's always been that way on the planet, right? There's always been each soul having their own unique experience, while someone is, as Anne was saying, Dolores saying, is having a resting life. Another person is not, right? and as a collective, then we are experiencing tremendous opportunity for transformation and opportunity for growth with the resistance. It's the old example that when you're swimming and you push against the swimming pool wall, you have the resistance to turn around and go pretty fast, right? So it's all inclusive. It's all part of the same process. So we honor what we're experiencing, and try not to judge ourselves or others, or be too hard on ourselves. And that's where the quantum healing hypnosis technique comes in, is to help bring greater awareness, and would you say, to who we are from a greater context. Like I love astrology, and of course Richard is my all-time favorite, and my mentor, my spiritual mentor, and because it helps me understand the cycles, as Richard was saying, and the context of my life, and then I can have less attachment, not detachment, not denial or repressing, but freedom. Less attachment.
May I toss in one idea?
Yeah, sure, Richard.
T.S. Eliot has a famous line in the Four Quartets. We had the experience, but missed the meaning. An approach to the meaning transforms the experience.
Yeah, so it's a time of reflection, while we're being asked in these uncertain times on a higher level to access our self-mastery. Right? That who am I really? What's really going on? And what skills and gifts and talents can I awaken within myself to not only empower myself, to create a better situation for myself. I like to say turn lead into gold, but also in so doing. So that's what I call being the conscious leader of your life, right? And then when we do that, we naturally achieve a higher state of being and radiate out who we are as our light, as our gifts, as our wisdom, as our talents, as our ability to engage. And then you become a conscious leader of the world. You don't have to be a political leader, but you are a conscious leader of the world when you embrace, as Anne was saying, the experience, and as Richard was saying, find the meaning in that, and then find our center, find our center of power, in the knowing that from a Dolores Cannon perspective, we wanted to have this experience of going into our greater self-mastery. So it's 11:52. I have one other little question, but are there any other questions, comments? We could probably do a retreat, a workshop on all of this. It's so enriching.
My last question. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, one quick idea. If you're talking to an animal or to a baby, they'll read your vibe and they'll try to understand what you're trying to tell them, but they don't understand the language. And language is the word logos, is the meaning, the sense behind something. And so what astrology, aster logos, is the attempt to kind of show you the why. Why is this happening to me? Well, let's take a look at that. And so the ability to get underneath the level of the circumstances, the physical, underneath the level of your feelings, that's earth and water, into the domain of what is it that the universe is trying to tell me, which ultimately is what is it that my higher self is trying to tell me, so that I can integrate and grow and become one with my own life and get the full value of my own life by looking underneath to what is the communication, behind the speech of the creator, as it were. The creator speaks in events, right? Hello, here's an event for you. What are you going to do with that? you know, who do you become and what's it trying to give you and how is this good, even though it looks like, you know, and how do you get the mastery of it by your ability to meet it on this higher level of knowing, which is basically what my work is to mirror back to people their own genius. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else? Any other? I have one little, Sander, did you have a question? Comment?
I'm just,
Wisecrack?
loving. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, the whole thing has just been so amazing. It just puts so much into perspective about what we attract, and nothing really seems unfair, out in the world when it seems like it could be. And I just wonder if you had an experience or anybody where when Anne was talking that I couldn't, all of a sudden it froze, or was that just my own network?
It was
Do you
your
know what I
own
mean? Like-
experience.
It must be
Well-
my Wi-Fi, like I mentioned. when we
Yeah, I
started.
was wondering, like there may be some things I wasn't supposed to hear yet, but all of a
Well,
sudden,
we do have glitches.
I want to throw out one more line for Dave and
Yeah.
whoever, which is a great line from Trungpa, the Tibetan teacher. To the ego, enlightenment is one insult after another.
Let's call breakthrough, right? That's a breakthrough.
And do you get a sense when you're going through a session and there's healing, do you get a sense of where the healing is coming from? So are there healing guides that are in the session that sort of show up? Is it coming from, the higher self? Because I always got a sense reading Dolores that there was a group of entities or somebody who was sort of, supporting and feeding her a lot of the information. How do you find when you're doing your session where does the healing or the healing energy do you feel come from?
Well, she talks about the subconscious being like a collective of light beings.
Okay.
They're higher than ascended masters, but on that level of spirits and guides. And so we actually do something called the body scan. And I don't normally tell people in advance we're going to do it, which is kind of great. And we ask the subconscious to come in and do an assessment of any areas in the body that are out of alignment, out of balance and needing some healing. And it will go to like the brain, or it will go to, the right hip joint. And I'll say, well, what's wrong with it? And where did it originate from? And then we'll go into a whole other past life experience, or we'll go to something that happened at a traumatic birth, and then I'll say, well, can this be healed? Can it be healed now? And they will tell me. I'll say, I'm very curious. It's one of Dolores' favorite words, just be really curious. How are you doing this? And sometimes you'll get a very technical response, and sometimes it'll just be, I'm bringing in light. We're bringing in light. The person needs to breathe it. And I say, what's happening to the body when this is going on? It's so incredible. So it is this collective that's coming in that knows everything about us, loves us unconditionally, completely supports everything that's happening, and gives the person exactly what they need at that time. If you go on some of the Facebook pages, you'll read people say that I had a session and nothing happened. I'd say, well, listen to your recording. And it's just, it's people have a lot of expectations. My daughter, very open to this, but for 2 weeks said, Mom, I'm afraid I'm not going to go under. I'm afraid I'm not going to go under. You're not going to be able to hypnotize me. Well, guess what? If you say that every day for 2 weeks, I'm not going to be able to hypnotize you. It's just the way it is. But people who are open for the healing will get it. So
That's
yeah,
the question I had. That was the question that I had. The third one was, and you sort of addressed it just there, but if someone who's really curious and interested and is drawn, to having a quantum healing hypnosis session, but they have concern about being vulnerable, or what if they find something they can't handle? Like, what if I'm told something that I can't handle? So I'm not saying that will happen, but, I've heard people say things like that over, the last 25 years in their healing journey. And so how would you address that?
You know what? I haven't seen it. It was something I'm worried about for myself, because, I'm a pretty mental left brain air person, but I have never seen that. I had a woman who very early on, was my third session, vomited in the session. And she had just sort of said something to me at the last minute before we're going under. She says, "Oh, I might have something going on with my liver and my gallbladder, but I don't know." So we asked the question, and she vomited like, and unfortunately, neither of us were afraid. And she came back and lay down and went under even deeper than she was before. But we were able to debrief it, as she says, that was a huge purge. It's someone I've come to know actually, and it was like a huge turning point for her. Just to, I don't know all that she let go of, but I do know the past lives it was attached to. I've never seen people get information they couldn't handle. And in case they forget, I get a lot of people to give me like a 1-minute video review if they ever say that, they don't remember what happened or wasn't any good. No, they're all pretty like, wow, that was incredible, mind-blowing experience. And almost everybody says, well, that's not what I expected. I've just not seen that. I totally trust the higher self. Do we have much more time? Are we gonna leave soon? Do I have 1 more minute?
Are we gonna just cut off in 1 minute? I'm willing to stay on.
I just want to tell you one more story, and it doesn't really answer your question, but I had a woman, it was a friend who came, and she had very specific questions. We did a great interview together. She went under, and it was about 10 minutes in. She said, "Anne, this isn't working." I said, "Why not?" She's, "I can't stay awake. I can't stay awake. What am I going to do?" And I said, "No, you're just really relaxed. You're doing great." No, she started snoring. So I got her up. We had a cup of tea. We went down again. And she said, "I just can't stay awake." I said, "You know what? I'm going to ask all of your questions anyway. We're going to go on. We're going to go again. And if answers are coming through, that's great. And if not, don't worry about it." So I asked her 12 or 13 questions. And then afterward, we debriefed. And she said, "Maybe I just wasn't meant to hear anything today." I said, "Well, maybe that's possible. Maybe you're just really tired." Let it go. I just let it go. And I didn't see her for a good couple of weeks. And when I did see her again, I said, "We can do that again. We'll start earlier in the morning. We'll make sure you're very alert coming in." She said, "Anne, that's not necessary." I said, "Why not?" She said, I get a chilling in saying this. "Every one of my questions has been answered in the last couple of weeks." And that's when I knew I really had to trust the process. There wasn't anybody doing anything wrong. She got the information that she needed. She asked the questions, we put them out there, they came. And I don't know why she couldn't go under that day, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's about the inner knowing. Like it's not that we have to do all things and all modalities and have all experiences at once. We're guided to what we feel will support us at any time in our life. And it's our own inner discernment, or what I call the whispers of our soul, that will help us, in that direction. So I'm assuming then people would feel guided, to come to a quantum healing hypnosis technique session. And those who aren't interested aren't going to pursue that, right? It's not something that.
Well, exactly. And
Right.
I don't have a website. Maybe someday I will. I don't know, but I won't do a session with someone without having a personal phone conversation with them. So I can understand, because some people really don't know anything about it. And I feel I have a responsibility to make sure that they do. I can send some links and we'll have lengthy conversations, but I want to know, I want to feel them vibrationally, and I want them to get a sense of me.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can establish some kind of understanding and trust in that phone call, I might say maybe it's not a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time it wouldn't really be a good fit, in my experience and from what I know from Dolores, is with somebody with a schizophrenic or somebody who's really living in an altered state, because you really wouldn't know what's coming through, and I don't want to have the uninvited show up. But I think the trust that's established right at the beginning, the person's intent is in place, and we have made a connection, and they understand what I have to offer and what the structure is and what they're coming to. And because it's a lot, people don't know me, they're coming into my home usually. Is it a safe space? So I try to create that culture of safety and trust really early on. And I've never had a cancellation. I have never been ghosted. But I think it's because we try to have that personal connection. And people asked about my phone number at the beginning. My phone number is on my card. People are still surprised. You know, I didn't expect someone to answer the phone. I didn't expect to have a conversation with somebody. I'm very old school that way.
And what's the approximate cost of doing a session with you? I know we're all thinking that, so I thought I'll ask it.
Well, there's some wonderful. So there's 3 levels. Okay, there's interns. You can probably, if you're in Toronto, you can go into the QHHT official directory, just QHHT directory, and you can Google interns in Toronto, and they're free. Although if you see an intern, make them a donation, give them a gift card or something. I don't know. And then there's
What's the
level
cost
1
with you?
with me, and I'm a level 2. And I was going to say there's also level 3s. There are only 33 level 3s in the world. There is one in Toronto and one in Montreal, one in BC. I'm a level 2 and I'm charging $300. Okay. When I've had sessions, 2 of my sessions were with a level 1 who charged $400. And I'm having a session with a woman next week who charges $440, and they're level 1s. But they've had more experience than me, perhaps, but it's very relative. There's a wonderful woman, if you want to explore somebody's sessions, who's got Suzanne Spooner, the designer series. Wonderful sessions that you can listen to if you go into her website. She charges $933 American. Just perspective. So I charge $300. You know what? I don't have any overhead. People come to my home. I don't even have a website I have to manage, and I want it to be affordable. And
are you based in Toronto, or are you based?
I'm in Barrie.
Barrie.
I have to say it's a bit of a snow belt right now. Yeah, I'm in Barrie, and if I travel, I'll travel up to an hour, but I'm not keen to go to Toronto, frankly. Although I've had Toronto come to me, I've had Uxbridge come to me, I've had lots of people come up here. They don't mind coming up. I just don't want to go down.
Yeah, of course.
And the other thing about QHHT, and you'll find this if you do some exploring, Dolores was very, very specific about they have to be done in person. There are people who do this work online. And I will tell you, there's something called BQH, Beyond Quantum Healing. And a lot of them are QHHT trained. And I think it was maybe kind of a COVID sort of thing that happened where people couldn't make the connections they wanted to make, but people were really wanting the work. And so they created their own protocols for doing it online. And Dolores's reasons for not doing it online, for doing it in person, are very real. I'm this far away from your head. I'm watching your eye movement. I'm watching your breathing. I'm in touch with what's going on. And that poor woman, when she vomited, I was glad I was there. A lot of trauma does come up, and there are things that we can do, you know, with our voice to help them not go through the whole experience. But I have heard of situations where people have gotten up off the bed and been wandering around, or it got really dark and they couldn't see the person anymore, or the worst thing of all, the technology just glitches. So those are her reasons. But having said that, I'm not saying you couldn't have a really good BQH session if you wanted to do it online. I haven't had one, but I'm sure they're good.
Wonderful. Well, that's a lot of great information. So before we forget, Anne, can you put your email
in the chat? Yes, I will. And any questions that come up, I'll put my email in. I'm happy to have a phone call. I love doing this. I hope you can tell. It's just as exciting for me to do a session as to give one. I really think it's work whose time has come. And the more you practice it, and if you're meditators, you already know this, you really get how you can do your own healing. And it's all about asking and intent. But it's kind of like a yoga class. I'd far rather a guided yoga class in a group than doing my own thing with the TV. You know, like this, being guided and being taken into the questions is something I can't do for myself. It really does make a huge difference. So
wonderful. So we're going to stay on. I respect everybody's time. It's 12:07, but I'm going to stay on, and we can continue to chat. And we can do the long distance Reiki, and Richard's going to guide us with a guided meditation. But I did want to just share one little thing about my own personal experience with past lives. Now, I haven't done the quantum healing hypnosis technique, but I have had tremendous, probably thousands of out-of-body experiences. in different realms, in different dimensions, and and I have had spontaneous past life reviews, and to be able to view and release and resolve, if you believe in past lives. I had no opinion on past lives. I didn't really care if I had a past life or not until I experienced them when I fall asleep. And it is so valuable, and it can help you understand so much in your life, so that you can be more empowered and release it. So again, like I was saying earlier, you don't have to carry unresolved burdens anymore. But just very briefly, I had a dream when I was in my deep healing, and it was like a multidimensional experience where I viewed myself being executed and in a pit, in a firing squad, and I was a monk. And the other monks that were my friends were people who were acquaintances in my life in a very different world. We were on very different paths. And there was no judgment to them, but they were very on very materialistic path. But we always were familiar to each other. They were always happy to see me, but we weren't meant to be together in this lifetime. But the biggest awareness of that experience was as I was in the pit, in the firing squad, being executed, and my spirit left my body. And I've had a past life experience like that where I went, oh, I've just been killed, or I've just been executed, time to leave my body. And I had in those instances, I'm not saying that is for everybody, I had no suffering. And I said, my teaching that lifetime was, I did not have to die for my beliefs. And so that was very clear. And the whole experience was in a few seconds. Like I was in, an altered state or whatever, in my dream state. And I saw it, and my spirit released. It was happy. And I was like, oh, I'm out of my body. And I didn't have to die for my beliefs. And when I look at my life now, I don't really have attachment, like I have strong beliefs, but I don't feel I have to die for my beliefs, right? So I just wanted to share that with the group, that if someone's interested in past lives, you don't have to believe in them if they're not of interest to you. But they can be very, very efficient and profound in your own healing and personal development. So anything else for today before we go into long distance Reiki with Richard?
I just have a question. I'm just responding to somebody in the chat, and I'm not just sure how to send reply. Is there a trick to that?
Just press enter.
I thought so. To Lisa.
Lisa.
Anyway, in the chat, I will put my phone number and email. I'm trying to send it. I just don't know why I can't deliver it.
Okay.
I have one more I have one question for Velvet. Is Velvet there?
Velvet.
I have a niece named Velvet.
You have a question for Velvet? Are you responding to her question?
I just wonder if she's my niece.
Could be.
Could be.
And for those who are listening to this on my Apona Healing podcast, would you like to share your email address or a way to contact you?
Yes, absolutely.
Like verbally, like orally, so people can hear it.
Okay, I'll give it to you very quickly. I can be reached at 705-725-8057, or text is good, or at Rosart, AROSART @hotmail.com.
Wonderful. And while we're sharing information, I would love to share Richard's information of how you can contact Richard for an amazing astrological reading of your lifetime. And Richard also offers these amazing readings as great Christmas gifts or holiday gifts. It's a gift that lasts forever because you can go back and listen to his readings and hear something that's relevant to you. You know, it's they're so layered and so deep and powerful. So Richard, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I came up with a special address for new people, just called yumplanet@yahoo.com. And that's the easiest way. I mean, phone numbers there, 437-994-7006, but a quick email will get to me. And yeah, also, there's short readings, that like an MP3 of like 13 minutes, very concentrated, that you can give as a gift, so that they don't cost much, for presents. And then there's full readings, or even half readings, according to what you want to spend and what you want to receive. I'm always here to serve the client on their terms, whatever they need.
And Richard does.
Questions allowed, including relationship charts and business charts, whatever it is you want to take a look at, to look at the deeper level of what is my business really about, or what's this relationship really about, or how come this thing keeps showing up, and what's it trying to teach me, to serve you. And getting, again, my job is to mirror your inner genius. It's not to believe anything I say, it's to see what it triggers in you is what matters. I'm just here to go into places in you of awareness to go, hi, here's something to ponder, and what do you get from this?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Richard. So we're going to start the long distance Reiki with the guided meditation. And anyone who'd like to stay on after to hang out, I will be hanging out, so you're welcome to. And thank you all for joining us today. I know everybody's schedule is busy. I know we're all dealing with a lot in life, so I honor each of you for who you are and for participating in this collective of raising the vibration, bringing greater awareness to aspects of ourselves, and being the conscious leaders of our lives and of the world. So let's get started. So we'll take a nice deep breath. We'll just mute. And I'm just going to do a little preamble, and I'll send long distance Reiki to the group, and Richard will take it away. So let's take a nice deep breath. Imagine ourselves in a beautiful place, in perfect health in every way. And that infinite river of gold and white light coming in, healing every cell in your body. Richard?
So we're letting in that which is already perfect, that which is immeasurably satisfying, that which is who we really are, not a personality, but a presence. And we're letting in that presence is what we need and what we want and who we are, that we are what we need. And we just let that vibration, let that feeling pour through us, in us, as us, and radiate to the world. We hand over our destiny, everything we could want, everything we want to let go of, we hand it over completely to that which is already perfect, which is us, which is everyone. And by shifting the vibration into satisfaction, the world becomes a mirror of that satisfaction. And so we let in and allow ourselves to receive what an all-loving being would want us to receive. We let ourselves love ourselves. We let ourselves accept that which belongs to us, that which was made for us, this moment. We let go of all assumptions, of every belief that could possibly get in the way of that satisfaction. And we let ourselves, like little children, receive that which is ours, that which love wants for us, that which is the highest satisfaction in this life, that which is effortless, that which is already here, that which is complete, whole, satisfying. And we bathe in that satisfaction. We let go of trying to control this life, knowing it is already controlled by love, which only wants us to attune to that love, then everything works. It's not about becoming anything or doing anything, though perfect action comes from this place. As the I Ching says, one who acts from these deep levels makes no mistakes. And even the mistakes serve us. And so we dissolve back into that which is perfect. We relax into the gifts that are meant for us. We relax into the gifts that come through us to others. We relax into that which is already prosperous, already satisfying, already wise, already complete, already perfect. We already are that which we seek. And we give thanks for that. We bathe in that. We let go of everything that would deny that. And we let go into the real reality of heaven within. And the real reality of our vulnerable human self being taken care of as we walk through this 3D life. We have a back foot, as my teacher would say, if you want to push a car, you need one foot outside the car. And so outside this 3D movie that we're in, which is perfect, we let in that which is eternally satisfying, and we allow it to be our life.
Well, let's all take a nice deep breath. And just slowly return when you're ready.